Hi, welcome back to the Rich Fritzky Show. Hasn't been much of a show of late, to tell you the truth, because we've had a significant number of issues that have kept us from doing this for a bit. And I know I've said we're going to get back to it on a regular basis a couple of times in the past. This time, I truly mean it. So I thank you. If you're still out there listening, that's wonderful. Today, I'm going back to my Boston days. All I do is tell old stories that hopefully have a moral or a message or meaning in them that will matter to all of you and not just me. This tale today is another one of my Boston tales. Going to take you to Southie, or South Boston. Southie is a working class Irish neighborhood. The Irish who made enough to get out would either be in Jamaica Plain or West Roxbury in Boston, or God bless them, on the Cape or the North Shore. Folks in Southie worked the docks, the sea, the factories. They were hands-on. They did the break-your-back trades. They were cops, mechanics, bartenders, and yes, thugs. The D Street Housing Project housed what I recall what was somewhere between 1,750 to 2,250 folks. In Southie, no one had to walk more than a block or two to a tavern with a shamrock, leprechaun, or pot of gold gracing the door. But in the early summer of '74, there had been a string of brutal murders at the D Street Housing Project. It was so boldly headlined, and on one particular morning, there was a piece in the Boston Globe which described it as the most desperate place to live. Certainly the most desperate in the city of Boston. But it was a place to live from which hope had escaped. Hope had picked up and run away. And I remember later that morning talking to two of my good friends, Tom and Carolita Roberts, Tom Halley and Nita. They were, like me, what you'd call junior staffers. We were the right out of college crew. But the three of us decided, I don't recall anyone asking us to go do this, but we decided to run out and take a look at D Street for ourselves. And it sure didn't impress. It looked like holy hell. Truly did. Some unknown sediment and spray paint everywhere made ugly the bricks, and there were expletives all over the place as well, and all of the wooden doors to every apartment building had peeling paint. The bricks were ugly, the wood of the doors were ugly, the parking lots and little entrances and exits all looked like hell. Pothole city. There were no plants, there were no flowers, there was no sign of life. Even overgrown tree branches touched the ground. It was not at all attractive. Those folks we met on our walk through the complex that morning, virtually all complained of some problem with electric or with plumbing. No one had an encouraging word to say about the place. It was simply, and I think this is fair to say, it was a spirit-sapping shamble of a place to live. There was absolutely nothing that invited or welcomed. Or as my friend Barbara Ward wrote so long ago, like so much of urban America, it was decidedly devoid of the colors, scents, and textures of living things. So the three of us talked on the way back, and we conspired together, and we had the thought of turning the city on to do absolutely everything it could there. And when we got back to the office, Tom and Ita were going to work on Ira Jackson. Ira Jackson, out of the Kennedy School at Harvard, he was the genius. He was the mayor's policy guru. And he also gratefully just happened to be the person who invited me to come to the city of Boston. And so Ita and Tom were going to work on him, and I was going to work on Larry Quayle, which was easy for me to do because I'd grown close to him. We had worked close together. And Larry Quayle was out of some old book, some old story. He was, I believe, serving his fourth consecutive mayor then. He went all the way back to the James Michael Curley days, that most heralded mayor of Boston, James Michael Curley of the great novel, The Last Hurrah. That was him. So Larry went all the way back there. He knew where all the bodies were buried. He knew who could do and who would not. He knew how to get every component of city government lit up. And only Larry Quayle could do that. So both of them liked what we had to say, and Larry and Ira then sold the mayor on the massive scope of our suggestions that were, we learned later today, to be implemented the very next week. A total immersion project where every city department or agency would be charged with doing anything and everything imaginable within its purview and power to make a difference there. We three, given the authorship of the idea, were going to be on site at D Street the next week throughout. There was an empty apartment, and we were to work out of there. And we were to be the point people, the schedule makers, the pressers, if you will. We were to make sure everybody got there and did exactly what they were supposed to do. And it was exciting. So many departments of city government were to be directly involved. Offhand, I remember the Boston Housing Authority, the Office of Facilities Management, Parks and Recreation above all, and police and fire department, both very important. The Office of Personnel, Public Works. Boston had an entity in summer called Summer Thing, and they had the Summer Thing stage, and they produce all kinds of wonderful shows for the public over the course of the summer. And also the Office of Human Rights, the South Boston Little City Hall, and I'm sure I'm missing some. It was to be an all-out resurrection project. Collectively to be there and to have one's hand on the switching station as we did turned out to be a remarkable experience as we coordinated what truly became a bold and bright transformation. The exterior of every apartment was power washed, and the doors were all repainted, and multiple crews of electricians and plumbers worked overtime, dealing with legitimate complaints. All the crumbling, pothole-infested walkways, avenues, and parking lots were given a clean sheen of fresh tar of blacktop. The fire department came in to replace all the broken switches, check for and deal with prospective hazards. The police department committed to assigning both a cruiser and beat cops to D Street. The Department of Health set up a clinic on site to work with any of those terribly addicted who wanted to choose something different or work on something different. Parks and Recreation, I remember them as the real champs. They were the heroes. They tilled and reseeded every swath of grass. They pruned trees, planted flowers and plants everywhere. And in every little mini park, they brought in new swings, new slides, new equipment. Outdoor benches were also liberally placed on the property. And to top it off, 1,000 summer jobs were to be made available to the youth of D Street and South Boston. Sign-ups just happened to be right outside the apartment we were working out of, right in front of our little headquarters. And the youth of South Boston turned out en masse, and that was wonderful. The mayor apparently had hogtied and announced that the city council was going to approve auxiliary budget requests that were to be required by many a department, given what they were expending on D Street. And a wonderful sidebar for me was my steadily budding relationship with a 5-year-old, adorable, red-headed Colleen Shanahan. Colleen in both name and spirit. From the apartment immediately across from the one we operated out of, she hung with us quite a bit, and I started to call her my assistant, with the permission of her mom, of course. She also spent many a moment with Tom and Ita as well, but make no mistake about it, I was her guy. Now, girls my own age back then, who I was interested in, generally did not return the favor. But little girls, why, they just adored me. And I respectfully adored them in return. The whole effort that week ended with a great surprise barbecue for everyone at D Street and their neighbors, and a Summer Thing stage production featuring the finest Irish bands in all of Boston for tenants and their Southie neighbors. It was supposed to be a non-alcoholic party, but beer was coming in from everywhere, from our newfound friends in the apartments, even from the police department, from neighboring bars. So it was quite a shindig, to be sure. I think you needed the beer, though. I think you needed it to go along with that evening's Irish liberation music. If you've ever been in an Irish bar, you know what I mean. The first magic moment that night came as the sun, literally, I'm not BSing here. It came as the sun set over the Atlantic and the band on stage was singing of the sweetness of Killarney, and my little darling Colleen sidled up to my side and put her little hand in mine. 48 years removed, but it's still just a moment ago. One of those frozen in time as my heart, weakened that moment, now skips the exact same beat that it did back then. And I think in retrospect, I just pray that life smiled on her. The second magic moment came later that night when I stood with Tom and Ita, my co-conspirators and great friends, on a D Street roof nearest to the stage, taking in the spectacle below, taking in the wonder of what was pure joy on display, a community celebrating happily, and I trusted desperate no more. Never had another week quite like it. I've had my fair share of very good ones, and I've been mightily blessed. And I reluctantly and later and elsewhere learned that I could do far more coming in from the outside and forging public-private ventures and nonprofits to do a bit of what government was failing to do. I fear that failure is only getting worse today, as one party absolutely and adamantly refuses to do anything that helps a human being, and the other has negative plants enough, like Manchin and Sinema, to excuse it from doing a damn thing either. Hard to believe, but true. But hey, I'll always have the D Street summer of '74 in the great city of Boston, which did the impossible. Once upon a time, indeed, the impossible, raising up an entire community. Would that there had been thousands of D Street moments, but they're rare indeed. For great, especially today, great is the need to beat back the ignorance, the distortion, the hate in our United States that makes life so difficult for the impoverished and the dispossessed and the struggling masses out there. While the 1% and the privileged, they live like demigods. And oh, what they could collectively do to turn the world around for their brother and sister citizens. The need to better educate, to enlighten, and to do justice for all ought to humble and challenge us all. As JFK said so long ago on this earth, God's work must truly be our own. That means your own, our own, all Americans. One. Why not? Why not? Why not? Enough for today. Thank you for listening. Smile on your brothers and sisters out there, and we'll be back soon enough. Take care.